Welcome everybody, we are back. It is episode 13, unlucky for some, of Right to the Source. My name is Robin Harrison and I am here as ever with my faithful sidekick, Mr. Ed Birkin. Ed, how are you today?
Good, good. I'm just wondering what the word faithful means.
Faithful?
Faithful, as you describe me. Does that mean faithful with a good face?
No, it's just my accent messing
Ah,
up faithful. But a face full, like a face full of, you could have like a face full of a food of makeup, that kind of thing. So a faceful
a,
is actually a word.
a faithful, just too much in your face, perhaps.
Yeah, two
That's the
in your
problem.
face.
Too in your
Yeah,
face. Okay. Now
yeah.
I'm
I mean,
back, and I've got a confession to make. I have actually prepared for this podcast, which is
what?
either going to make it seem slick or just take away all the magic. So we'll have to see.
Scared as to what might happen.
Well, I wasn't on holiday, was I? So, you know,
Oh, yeah, I
what else are you going
suppose.
to do?
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's the first time for everything, I suppose.
Have you prepared though? Because we need story of the week off you. We'll do that after stat of the week, should we?
Yeah, we need story of the week, and we also need stat of the week
Yeah.
before we go into discussing our two countries, which, as I recall, is Slovenia and Chile.
Correct. How do you want to start?
Let's start with stat of the week.
Okay. So slightly off piste. I was going to give an H2GC stat of the week. Instead, I'm going to give. It's not based on our data, but stat of the week is the number 22. 22 is the number of senior squad players and coaching staff that have left Sheffield Wednesday since the end of the season, none of which
Wow.
have been replaced. And 73% is the implied probability that Sheffield Wednesday will get relegated from the Championship this season, having finished 12th last year and been top of the league after the first game of the season, where he beat Wayne Rooney's Plymouth. Is it 4-0 or 4-1? I think it was 4-1. Another stat is it took me 5 3/4 hours to get up to that game, even though it was televised. But yeah, Sheffield Wednesday in a lot of shit. So
Well,
all parts of being a football fan.
Well, funnily enough, actually, I think there might be a connection to the story of the week because we've done a lot of really interesting things. You know, for example, I think Kyle Goldsmith's coverage of like the Brazil tax data, I think that was very interesting. It's a great piece by Jess Marquez on the Caesars hearing for a downstate casino license, which involved Jay-Z. Funnily enough, the other hearing, which was, I think, for the Queen's property, involved Nas, who famously had a feud with Jay-Z.
I wasn't aware of those feuds, but famously in certain circles. Good. Look
Yeah,
how diverse we're going. Christina Aguilera, Nas, Jay-Z.
yeah. I mean, it's like Jay-Z is not as good as Nas. Nas was.
I mean, I don't know much of Nas's music. We're not going to get into a bass about, but Jay-Z is pretty iconic, yeah?
Jay-Z is iconic, but Nas, albums like Illmatic, things like that, they are, they're incredible albums, and he's a great rapper.
Yeah, Billy Pipe had a good album in her day, and also a good TV career. But I think we're going off
Yeah.
track.
Yeah. And it was Resorts World.
Okay.
That was the operator. That was the operator for the Queen's Casino. Sorry, I just had a moment there. But yeah, so off the back of that stat of the week about a current crisis club du jour, Sheffield Wednesday, what I thought would be an interesting one to discuss is player account restrictions. So last week, the Gambling Commission responded to a request for information, and they said that 4.31% of UK betting accounts have had restrictions placed on them. So that equates to 643,000, something like that, 643,700, I think the number was. But interestingly, restricted accounts were more profitable than non-restricted. 46.78% of restricted customers were in profit compared to 25.42% of overall active customers. I think it was around 51% of the restricted account holders were loss making compared to something like, kind of like something in the 70s for unrestricted. What do you think of that?
Well, my initial view would be that my impression of it was that restrictions were there to prevent people from having such high losses rather than restricting wagering of people who are actually winning money off the bookmakers. But for those people who are trying to work out the very tenuous link between Sheffield Wednesday and the Gambling Commission Freedom of Information, that's probably related to a story I just told Robin off air, where being a football fan, going with my heart, not my head, Sheffield Wednesday 1-4 on of getting relegated, but only 5-1 of getting in the top half of the Championship, which is pretty terrible odds anyway. But I thought, I'm a Wednesday fan, let's just go with it. So last night on a major UK betting site that I won't name, but they're kind of main sponsors of the Championship, etc.
You might as well have just named them.
That I would place a wager on Sheffield Wednesday, finishing in the top half of the Championship, and was restricted to a £38 wager, which I just thought was ridiculous. I mean, source of maximum winnings £228, and this does actually happen to be an account that is in profit. There's nothing to do with deposit restrictions because I haven't deposited in 9 years, because I happen to win a decent amount on it, and it's nothing to do with how much I bet because I haven't placed a bet with them for a few months, and I just could not believe that I was being restricted to a £38 bet on a 5-1. I don't know. So in that case, whether it's because it's in profit, which I hadn't even thought of, or whether it's just because the risk of a £228 loss to them is too high, but you would have thought on the Championship, it is the best league in the world. Some in the Premiership would disagree, but for the true football fans, best league in the world, you would have thought that the trading teams, etc., would have much higher risk limits than the £200 potential loss. But anyway, so that was frustrating. But as anyone with any sane knowledge of football would say, it was a terrible bet anyway, and the fact it was restricted to £38.
Yes, it was. And it's a bold prediction, top half, in a league like the Championship.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have just laid them against relegation, but there's just zero liquidity on it in Betfair, so you can't do that. Okay. I couldn't place on them not getting relegated. I wasn't going to do it on them winning or top two, so it was the only real wager I could get. The handicap of them winning with 36-point deduction was just pointless because there's no chance of it. But you know what? If they end up bottom of the league and get beaten every week, then that's just part and parcel of being a football fan, and you go through that. So it is what it is. The other thing, though, I was looking up the Consumer Rights Act in the UK.
Wow, you're taking this to the highest court in the land, are you?
No, this is to Sheffield Wednesday. So when you're selling a season ticket, can you be done for false advertising? So the season ticket that they were selling, they advertised 9 players and a manager. So 10 people on there. So effectively saying, buy a season ticket, you'll be seeing these players in action. Now, I get there's movement, Yeah, it's part of the cadence of football. It's where we have summer transfer windows. But 9 of the 10 are no longer at the club. And the one who is probably won't be there much longer. He's just injured at the moment. So you kind of feel that when you're advertising something with pictures and 90% of that is not there, that's got to come down to some kind of false advertising.
At the time the tickets went on sale, those players were contracted to Sheffield Wednesday, though, right?
Yeah, but it's a bit like taking a picture of, Oasis and selling a concert ticket and saying at the time we thought they were going to be playing, but now they're not. You've got, I don't know, Nas or some lower tier person that no one's really heard of.
Christina Aguilera.
So anyway, that was my rabbit hole. But look, let's get on to stuff I've actually prepared. So Slovenia.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about Slovenia. I think, as we discussed last week, did we do population, things like that?
Yeah, we remember did. What the population was?
It was around 2 million.
Yeah, you guessed 8, but it was 2.
Yeah, 4 times higher. I remember. I quite literally just divided by 4. And the national dish is a form of buckwheat pancake, I think.
Veal and buckwheat dumplings.
Veal and buckwheat dumplings. It's a multifaceted land.
Do you want some gambling statistics?
Gambling statistics?
You tell
That's
us
not
what
we're here for, Ed.
You tell me what you know.
So it's a monopoly for betting and lottery, and then there are 2 categories of games of chance. I think is it special games of chance and then classic games of chance? And I think it's classic, if you'd like to kind of explain a bit more about what these different ones are.
Okay, so almost there. So yes, there was a monopoly on lottery and sports.
Yep.
However, I believe now both of the operators can offer both products. So effectively there's a duopoly between them. But yeah. There's a lottery sports operator. Gaming is a commercial market. So this effectively split between casinos and gaming halls. It's limited to 15 casinos and 45 gaming halls. Currently 12 casinos are in operation and 25 gaming halls. And online is allowed, but limited to those with land-based concession. Effectively, there's no regulated onshore online market of note. So GGR, 89 million euros for lottery in 2024, 105 million for gaming halls, and 176 million for casinos. A few more stats, because I've done the work. The average number of slots per gaming hall is... I'll give you multiple choice. 50, 150, 250, 350.
50, 150, 200 and 350. I'd say probably 150.
Correct. And the average number of slots per casino is almost double that at 293. Wow. An average of 19 tables. Now, the average spend per visitor, I will give you for the casino, is 136 euros.
136.
There's either 1.2 or 1.4 million visitors. Similar number of visitors for gaming halls. So what do you think the average spend per visitor in a gaming hall is if it's 136 in the casino?
136 in the casino. So I would, considering the casino market is bigger, I would assuming it's a bit less. So 136, maybe 100, between 80 and 100.
Yeah, 74. So I thought maybe a bit lower because people tend to go to the casino, for kind of more of a session, so to speak. So, so that's my statistics on the Slovenian market. So we get good data by the Ministry of Finance. So if anyone wants to look at our model, they're more than welcome to. And the next one was Chile.
Yeah. Are we just literally listing the stats and then moving on rapidly?
Sorry, do you want to talk anything else about Slovenia?
Well, just on the tethering, because obviously in Eastern Europe, what we tend to see is the kind of land-based companies transitioning into online. So it's interesting that they have these kind of tethering requirements similar to what we see in the US, but effectively more restricted in the US because they're limited to one skin and it has to be the same operator. But you said the online market was pretty negligible. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose actually, and you're right, we probably should talk about things rather than just stats. I suppose if it were a larger market, perhaps there'd be an argument that if you're an online operator, especially when, let's say, folks in Eastern Europe, do you either in partnership or I know you have they say it's domestic operators, whether that means there can't be a foreign owner in them or what level you need, or even just partner up a bit like people do in Belgium, or Switzerland. But, do you actually get a casino? There are still 3 licenses left, and then use that to really take, control of the online market. I suppose if you've got a population of only 2.2 million, then, maybe the view is not worth the investment. If you had the same regulations in an adult population of, what did we say it was in Chile, 15.47 million.
Yeah.
Then perhaps it becomes a lot more attractive. But no, I'm not aware of anyone really gone online, in any meaningful way in the market. Unsure.
All right. Well, we've managed to stay on track to an alarming degree.
But then what's the population, as you say, knowledge of this, of adult population of Belgium?
I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest.
Switzerland. I mean, I know Switzerland's probably a much higher.
Yeah, Switzerland's
GDP per capita than it is in Slovenia. But
yeah, I mean Belgium also is hobbled by restrictions on the online market. I mean, it's worth noting that people like Superbet, I think they acquired Napoleon, Kindred acquired a casino in Belgium. So there are kind of examples of these operators coming in and then acquiring a foothold in the market, which gives them online access.
Okay. Yeah, the Belgian population is 13 million, so it's quite.
Oh yeah, that's a difficult comparison to make.
For you to go out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about Chile then. Chile's an interesting one because, and just to reiterate, pastel del choclo is the national dish.
It is.
I wrote that down because I remembered the word. Chile.
Red carnation, was that, or
I think so.
Slovenia's. Was that Slovenia?
No,
or
I think
Chile?
Chile was some form of carnation, their national flower. Well remembered.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, please continue, Robin.
Anyway, thank you, Ed. So Chile's an interesting one because during that period where Brazil was kind of ramping up and pushing towards some form of regulation, when Peru was working on this, Chile was also in the mix. So I think it was December 2023, the Chamber of Deputies passed an online gaming bill. And I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I remember that is 22 when the bill was first introduced. The bill came with basically a history of gambling, like from the start. The bill literally started with gambling first came about in this form and however many, centuries back, which was punchy. It was an interesting way to start. And at the end of 23, going into 24, it felt very much like Chile was probably going to regulate that year. The market was going to open. And really since then, it's stalled. There's no other way to say it. It's stalled. They removed the urgency clause, which then makes it, essentially the political will doesn't seem to be there to push things forward.
It's stuck in the Senate and doesn't look like moving anytime soon.
Exactly. And then there was, earlier this year, there was talk about looking at, some form of a blacklisting or ASP blocking to push out, online offshore companies. That's not really come to anything, but it does feel just sort of a bit stuck. But having said that, interestingly, it does seem to have quite a robust land-based market. I mean, I think it was actually, it might have been a little company called H2 we quoted in the story, Kyle Goldsmith, senior reporter recovers last time, and I think it was something like $790 million, something like that, for the land-based market alone.
Yeah, I think we should stop quoting Kyle's name. He's gonna start thinking he's good at what he does. But yes, so there is a land-based market. So let's talk about what is legal. Lottery, which is the only legal sports betting, and online sports betting, as well as lottery products. And they actually have a strong horse race betting sector.
Yeah.
Teletrack is the other one that's allowed online. So market size lottery, 125 million euros, and there's about 1,000 pesos per Chilean pesos per euros. If you want local currency, if I say 125 million euros, it's like 125 billion pesos, effectively. Right. So sports, of that, 5 million. Onshore sports, 5 million euros.
It's tiny.
But there's another 55 million from horse race betting. So, that is a big part of the market. But yeah, land-based casinos, 163 million. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably under $600 million or so, depending what exchange rate we're using, 650. But yeah, it's a strong land-based casino market, which is split into two. There was the municipal casinos, and then under the 1995 Act, they have these effectively privatised casinos. But they were showing very strong growth. I think last year the revenues actually came down a bit. But yeah, there is a strong land-based market. Put that into context where the offshore market is. It's interesting to talk about the 2022 when legislation was introduced. It was widely accepted offshore market to the point where Betsson was the main sponsor of the main football league. They actually renamed it Campeonato Betsson for the 2023 season. And I think that sponsorship was going to even cover sponsoring the football national team. But in 2023, September 23, the Chilean Supreme Court, I think partly maybe due to this regulation was coming through, stated that any gambling that is not expressly legal is illegal as a clampdown. So they had to cancel sponsorship. October, they announced that the sponsorship was finishing. I think it was year 1 of 3. Rumours were that it was 2.5 million sponsorship deal going up to 8 million euros by the end of the third year. So it's a reasonable amount of money. So suddenly you've got these football teams, a league, in limbo without money. My understanding is that all of these operators have stopped their sponsorship deals but continue to operate there. And it'd be interesting to see what happens if they, as you say, some form of blacklist, or they say, if you continue to operate in the market, you're not going to get licensed, which they haven't done yet. But we have offshore betting and gaming at the moment generating 450 million euros. So 97% of the market is offshore. So if you compare that to the land casino at 563, lottery 125, it is a huge part of the market. Main operators?
I'm waiting for you to tell me. So the one, I don't know as much about the Chilean market. Obviously, Enjoy, SA.
So to the main offshore ones, it was Betsson, who has seen revenues come down, or at least their visibility come down. Coolbet, Jugabet, Betano's actually seems, in terms of web traffic, have made huge leaps in the past couple of years. As they have elsewhere in Latin America. We actually did some survey data as well, and this is quite interesting. It probably doesn't reflect brilliantly on the surveys in some way, but what we found this in Brazil, which we'll talk about in a bit, and other places, is that in a lot of markets, people don't really understand what operators are licensed and which operators aren't licensed. So 60% of players that we surveyed, and we survey enough players that 90, so we do it all statistically, 95% accuracy, blah, blah, blah. I've forgotten the technical term now. But 60% of people state they only use licensed operators. Yet 34% of people also have 3 or more accounts, and there's only 2 licensed operators in the country. I think the fact is that when you are having people like Betson sponsoring the league, people will assume that they are licensed, or at least local. I mean, fine, in fairness, perhaps we should change the question to be more locally licensed, because they clearly are licensed, let's say, but licensed onshore. But I think it is emblematic of the issue that is in a lot of countries, especially where it becomes more of an issue with advertising restrictions being put in, is that a lot of players are not aware which operators are licensed and which ones are not licensed. And then in terms of view of the industry, the last statistic I'm going to share for free, 48% of non-gamblers have a negative view on the industry.
48% of non-gamblers. Okay.
But only 5% of gamblers have a negative view. You can see maybe why. And actually, so about 46%, I think, have an average view of non-gamblers, and the last 6% kind of have a positive view. But I suppose when you've got a lot of the non-gamblers who have online have a apathetic or negative view towards it, there's perhaps one of the reasons that there isn't as much push for anything to happen to regulate it. But it is still a big market, and I don't really see why they're not, wanting to regulate it, tax it, increase the consumer protection and all of that. It just seems a shame, especially when they see the success that there's been in Peru.
That's always kind of the million-dollar question. These ones where things essentially kind of slow down. Because we arguably saw that in Europe with the Netherlands. That was a lengthy process. It just kept getting a shelf because of a lack of political enthusiasm for passing legislation. And, well, we all know what happened there. It passed, but honestly, should it have even passed? Because the snapback against the industry just showed that was really a kind of pretty loose, thin support ultimately.
There was, but I think this is where it's difficult, because the industry doesn't help itself, but as an individual, operators there, you kind of have to go along with it. Is we saw in the Netherlands, and we're now seeing in Brazil, and pretty much choose a country, and it's the same kind of thing, is that a market regulates and people just throw money at marketing because they want market share, and there's just far too much marketing, and everyone goes, this is just taking the piss, and then there's a clampdown. But if you're one of the operators and you say, we're not going to do this marketing, you're just not going to get any share. There's no point being in the market. So because everyone's doing it, you kind of have to. But guess what? And I said this in Brazil at the start, I was like, it's going to be the same in the Netherlands and any other country. You're just going to screw yourselves. And funnily enough, now they're trying to stop marketing. Let's say I was watching one of the games there, and at one point on the screen, you could see 7 different, just in one still shot, taking a goal kick, you could see 7 different gambling companies being advertised on that one shot. So, if you're an operator there, you have to sponsor a football team to get visibility, but you can't be surprised when there's pushback.
No.
That's exactly what happened in the Netherlands.
Well, this is it. The industry is essentially kind of put in this catch-22 situation. I mean, could part of the solution be, there's some sort of, whether it's quotas or something a bit more kind of robust on proportion, proportionality of advertising. Because obviously, within for example, advertising blocks is usually a limit of no more than 2 gambling ads per block or something like that. But if they, do you think that's an area with regulation where it would actually help to be quite prescriptive?
Maybe, but then we talk about the importance of advertising to advertise the legal brands, and is one of the biggest tools to fight against illegal operators. And then, as the survey data in Chile seems to imply, I'm just using Betson as an example because they sponsor the league, change the league's name to their name, then people can associate that with being a licensed operator, is legal. Of course, it's got some form of trust and license and legality about it because they've named the whole league after it. So why wouldn't they assume that that's a licensed operator? So, if you want people to play with licensed operators, you need to be able to give them the opportunity to have this branding and advertising. But it doesn't, at the same time, need to be shoved down their throats. So I think that does need...
The point it The point at which
allowing
it
advertising doesn't mean that it should be a free-for-all. So yeah, I think
well,
there should be.
the idea of it being kind of shoved down people's throats, I always kind of struggle a bit with, because for the most part, especially with like television, radio, billboards, things like that, that only comes after regulation and licensing for the most part. So it goes from zero to existing. And I think just that change, this wasn't there before, this is now there. I'm very conscious of it being new. Because it's new, I notice it. I think that almost it feels like that almost actually skews perception a bit. Like,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is, and
If that is the case, in some market like Chile, obviously it wasn't. It was there
mhm.
before regulation.
Well,
But
this
yeah,
is it. I
you're
mean,
right.
like, I think there is kind of definitely a difference between this is new, oh look at that, I didn't see that before, and my God, this is everywhere, I feel bombarded.
Hmm.
Because I think like when you watch sports coverage in the US, there is a lot of advertising, for
Yeah,
the industry. Like it is, you do
I
very
mean
much notice it.
the US is ripe for having the same thing happen. Quite frankly, it's fine. I can't imagine any US regulators watch our podcast, but the amount of advertising there. Then again, the US is just a big advertising nation, isn't it? So maybe they don't care as much. US
And they
just
do
love
have
to
some great
advertise shit.
adverts as well.
Yeah, but I mean, it's everywhere. But I suppose it's kind of synonymous with the sport. But I feel as though we are probably moving towards the end.
We
I'm
are.
sure you've got important calls with people to do. So, random country generator?
Yes, what are we going to talk about next week? Aside from Brazil, because we'll look at the Brazil tax numbers next week.
Yes. And actually, as a spoiler alert, what do you call it? Preview? Hook?
A
What do you call
preview,
trailer?
a trailer,
Yeah.
a, a sneak
Teaser.
peek, teaser.
Teaser.
Yeah, there we go.
We've done some kind of quite deep research based on PIX transactions, looking at the offshore
Okay.
market. We just don't believe quite frankly, if people are talking about the size of the offshore market as a percent of the total market, we should saying how big it was based on the kind of January data and maybe February data, which was lower. And now you've seen, how big the onshore market has got. They're still talking about the offshore market being the same percent, and it just doesn't make any sense. And it also doesn't help them because suddenly you've just got this astronomical market size that's been claimed. So we've actually used data, funnily enough, to do it. So
Really?
we've looked at PIX. Yeah.
Wow.
Since analysis of PIX transactions to look at what the implied PIX offshore market share is, and also analysis of crypto use there. Because as we said in our previous podcast, some of the numbers on crypto are just ridiculous. And actually crypto can be tracked. So we look at the kind of crypto use, and we've got more survey data that looks
Okay.
specifically at Q2. So yeah, we'll do a bit of a thing on Brazil, and we haven't talked about it for a while. And the other one will be, how much do you know about Albania?
Actually, a few little things about plans or attempts to build a casino over there.
I mean, there are casinos over there, but
Yeah,
what's the
but
capital?
Tirana,
Good. Language?
Albanian,
Yeah. Currency?
say live or live, something like that.
Albanian lek. National flower is the red poppy. And the national dish is tavekossi, which is baked lamb with rice, which actually looks really nice.
Yeah, it was Anthony Bourdain ate it on an episode of, I think maybe Parts Unknown, which is a very
Lamb,
good program.
yogurt, eggs replacing sour milk, wheat flour, butter. So, Albania and Brazil. I know we
Albania
talked a lot
and
about
Brazil.
Brazil. We haven't talked about Brazil for a while, but I think now we've got this data on it. I think it's quite interesting to revisit because a lot of the views on the market, I think, are quite outdated, especially with the size of the offshore.
Yeah,
But hey, why
Yeah.
do you want to use data to look at the offshore market when you can just tell people it's 60% and just leave it at that for 6 months?
well, that's what we're here for, to bring data into it and to make it fun. Next week, as Ed says, we'll be talking Brazil-Albania like a World Cup third round group stage match. So,
Well, hang on, isn't the new World Cup going to have about 20 group stages now? They've expanded it to about 3,000 countries just to
oh God, at this
so
point
FIFA
it's
can get more.
At this point, it's basically it's a literal World Cup. Every team seems to play itself.
Do you think that the new expanded World Cup, which includes 90% of the countries, do you think Scotland will actually make it through to the finals out of qualifying?
I actually genuinely don't at the moment. We don't have a decent goalkeeper under the age of 40. We don't have a striker coming into their prime. And
No,
but
you have Scott McTominay, who was the lead goal scorer at the
yeah,
Euros thing. He used to play up front in the youth team for Man U, and is now, well, his girlfriend is called is it Queen of Napoli or Queen of Italy? After
something
his,
like that. I mean,
his I don't like to use the word heroics for footballers because there's nothing heroic about it. They're just good at football.
he
But
did
he is,
have an
he
excellent
is,
first season
yeah,
at Napoli,
he did.
and some of the goals he scored in World Cup qualifying, like his free kick against Spain, he is good. He'll be about. Callum McGregor won't. John McGinn's probably going to be getting on a bit at that point. So we're a team in transition, and the problem is I don't really know who's going to be transitioning in.
Well, I mean, Barry Bannon could still be. In fact, he's not even Scottish. Is he Scottish? He
Yes, he
played for
is.
Celtic. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
played
is.
for Celtic.
Barry
Yeah,
Bannon.
he's Scottish.
For people who don't know about the lower leagues of English football, Barry Bannon is he still at Sheffield Wednesday?
Well, I'd rather not publicise the fact that he is technically a free agent because he's out of contract. He is training with the team. He can be signed, but because of Sheffield Wednesday's financial issues, there's a ban on them signing anyone on more than £7,000 a week. But I don't want it to be known that he is potentially available. Or as one QPR WhatsApp group said when we played away and beat them, he said Barry Bannon, he may be 40-something years old. He's in his late 30s. He's 40 years old, but when it comes down to QPR, he plays like, I think, Iniesta. Because he can be that good, just pulling the strings, a wee little Scotsman. But again,
It's not that unusual a thing. Scotland occasionally has there's a strange track record of short, slightly players that perhaps don't look the most athletic, but being really good, tricky players. I mean, like John McGinn, I think doesn't really fall into that category because he's just a great player, But like back in the 90s, someone like Stevie Fulton, was at Hearts, was at Partick Thistle at the end of his career. He was actually a pretty tricky midfielder, good passer. Didn't really like to, chase the ball a lot, but he was, we can actually create these things. Even Billy Gilmore, he's maybe a bit kind of smaller and skinnier, but he's a great player.
well, if we are needing to cut down the length of the podcast, we know we've got some filler we can cut out at the end. But yes, Albania, Brazil, and probably another mention maybe of Sheffield Wednesday or the Jags or whatever team I then decide to follow next in a random sport. And possibly another mention of some random musical artists from Robin.
We might just try and do that. So, after that slightly extended outro, we hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye then.